Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday edition of Wall Dropping History. I am your host, Mr. Waldrop, and I have with me my guest, Elizabeth Waldrop. And she's here to help me out today on this Thursday edition of Wall Dropping History. Now, I do want to say one thing real fast. We are not going to have an episode tomorrow. I decided to go ahead and bump forward the culture day, if you will. I'm going to do the videos, since I wanted to make sure y'all had a whole week to send in videos of the pets. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Matter of fact, let me go to the agenda. So this agenda is a little off. Obviously, Monday we did psychology. Tuesday we did sociology. Wednesday was Pandemic Wednesday, and we did the bubonic plague. Thursday I said I didn't have a topic. Well, it turns out Friday I've got to do the dry run of the AP test, and I've got to start it at noon, or I think it's like 12:30. I've got to be in there. So I didn't want to have a 30-minute day for Indian culture. So I didn't want to try and cram that in like 30 minutes or something like that. So I decided I'm just going to go ahead and do it today, and we're going to push back the submission for the pet videos until Monday. So if you've not gotten that in, let me go ahead and put that up there. So if you want to send in a video of your pets, you with your pets, maybe a picture of your pet, go ahead and send that in. I don't care if it's pet rock. We'll take a look at it, right? But send that in. Pet rock. Thank you for doing that, Ms. Powell. So thank you for everybody for showing up. And I'm going to give my shout outs in just a second. But that will be on Monday that I will do the pet videos. And we're going to go ahead and bump the Friday edition forward to today. So that's what's going on today. Because it's a culture day, it is a little bit longer, but it should have a lot of fun stuff to get to. I've thought about, and let me know what y'all think in the comment section. I'm thinking about making a second video, so like we'll get most of the way through this, and then I'll stream a second video, and we'll all hop off of this one and go to the other video, because my fear is I know that Indian music is heavily copyrighted, and I think like most of these culture days where we do a culture day, they like to take down the videos. Some of y'all have actually sent me messages saying, hey, I did whatever, or tried to go do whatever video, and I couldn't do it. YouTube had taken it down. That's usually where it gets into the part of copyrighted music. So I think when we get to the music portion, the culture part of this, I think I'm going to stop it, and we're all going to migrate over to another video. So if they take that video down, we still have this video. So that is what is going on. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. Let me know what you think. Let me go ahead and give my shout outs today. A thank you, Nirali. By the way, a special thank you to Nirali. She and I put it in the presentation. She was huge in helping me with the music. So when we get to the music section, big shout out to her. The music that I had in this video, a lot of this was like 4 years old, 5 years old, maybe even older. And so she really helped me modernizing it. I know he's probably not watching. I think he's at work, but I have another friend of mine named Baji. And so Baji also helps me with the music. So the music in this is going to be a blend of the two of them providing me with assistance. Thank you for joining us, Kira. Thank you for joining us, Ashley, Patrick, Quinn, my lovely wife, Rachel, DeHavius, let's see who else, anybody, and Jayla. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you for your dedication to your education. All right. So let's get going. Should be a fun, action-packed episode today. Let me mute my phone real fast. Action-packed episode today. So we're talking about the entire Indian subcontinent, right? So we're not talking just India. We're talking about the entire region. And I'm going to go into more in depth of that in just a minute. So we're talking about this whole region right here. This is the Indian subcontinent, right? And why do we call it a subcontinent? Well, it's part of Asia, but there's so many things that, like, when you look at a continent, right? So when you're talking about Europe, okay? Europe and Asia, the largest country in both Europe and Asia is actually Russia. It's the largest country, right? But if I said, tell me about Asian culture, most of the people don't think Stalingrad. They're thinking Tokyo, or they're thinking Beijing, right? So think of it this way. Geographically, India is part of Asia, right? Like, I'm sure if somebody asked, Nurali, where are you from? She'd say, I'm from Asia, right? If they're talking about continents. However, India culturally has almost its own unique culture that is kind of proliferated out to the countries that kind of surround it, right? And a lot of these countries used to be part of India, which we're going to talk about here in a little while. So when we're talking about the Indian subcontinent, it's not to say sub is in less than, India is not less than, say, China. It's more like it is a smaller subsect as far as a larger chunk of the continent, right? So I want to kind of clarify that part of it. So the Indian subcontinent is really made up of 7 countries, right? So it's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. And they all share kind of similar cultural backgrounds, roots, sometimes religions, languages, so on and so forth, right? If you were to, say, be in Bangladesh and cross over the border into India, it's not going to feel like your life has gone into complete upheaval, right? Versus, say, if I were to leave France and go to Spain, very different situation, right? Or if I were to leave South Korea and go into North Korea, you're instantly going to know you're in a whole other place, right? So that's why we kind of subsect it off as a subcontinent. Now, a subcontinent is really a large landmass that is smaller than a smaller chunk of the whole continent. And this region is called the Indian subcontinent because India has dominated the region, particularly culturally, right? If you're somebody, say, in Nepal or Sri Lanka, I guarantee you're watching Bollywood movies, you're listening to Indian music, right? So although this region is about half the size of the U.S., it has more than 1 billion people living on it. In fact, India's population today is around 1.2 billion people. To give you a comparison, we're around 320 million. Right, so it's significantly more populated, even though it's not geographically larger than the United States. So my kind of question is, obviously, if you've got that many people living in a country, you got a lot of big cities. So what is the biggest city you have ever lived in, and how was life different than living here? So, Elizabeth, you unfortunately are victim to the same situation I am, which is...
this is the biggest city
Yeah,
I've
you've
ever
never
lived
lived in a big city. This is the biggest city I've ever lived in with 250,000 people. To me, this feels like big city living. To Rachel, who grew up in Jakarta with 20 million, it feels like I took her out in the middle of the woods and dumped her off in Green Acres. So, send plants too.
I'm just not.
Yeah, you can send plants.
I don't like the city. I just don't.
You're a country gal.
I don't like the city.
Well, I think a big part of it is what you're used to, right? I'm used to.
Like if it's either here and be like around like all these people like in like a really nice neighborhood, or if it's live next to like live in Fairhope, a calm, peaceful city, like where everybody is just like where it's such a small town where everybody knows everybody.
Right.
And like
well, yeah.
here,
so I grew up a lot in Fairhope, and
yeah.
Fairhope's got 20,000 people. So it's like
Where
you're constantly bumping into everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's one Walmart, and you're gonna bump into everybody at Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Like our grandma and granddad, the people like they go to Jeans Bean so much that people at Jeans Bean will just be like, "Hey Patrick," or "Hey Benny."
Right.
I'm like, "Do I know you?"
Yeah, Kiera said this is the biggest city she's lived in. Oh wow! So Quinn has said this is also the biggest city she's lived in. So a lot of country folk in here like myself. All right. So millions of years ago, South Asia was actually part of Africa, and about 50 million years ago, it split off and collided with Central Asia. So India was down here. Right, it was down here right near Madagascar, and it slowly slid off, and it smacked into Eurasia, right? Which is why, if you ever were to go to India, you're going to see a giant amount of mountain ranges, and that's where the two continents have slammed into one another. So right up in this area, right in here, is the Himalayan Mountains, and these are actually some of the largest mountains on the planet.
Everest in there, though?
Yeah, we're about to talk about that. And thank you for joining us, Marion. And by the way, the question I just asked is this the biggest city that you've ever lived in? If not, where have you ever lived? Have you ever lived in a city bigger than here in Baton Rouge? All right, so the mountain ranges still form the edge of the Asian subcontinent, and today the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush Mountains separate the western portion of South Asia. And by the way, that is a major factor as to why Indian culture is so different than the rest of Asia, right? Why it's so different than, say, Russia or China, so on and so forth, is because those giant mountain ranges really function to kind of separate it off, right? If you were to go back in time when, these cultures were first forming, the average person did not have the means to cross the Himalayan mountains. It's just too treacherous. They couldn't do it. There was no planes back then. So it'll really allow them to have their own little pocket, unique experience of culture and art and so on and so forth, which we're going to talk about later on. The question I have is, have you ever been in the mountains, and if so, where? Where did you go? Obviously, I know. Yeah, on the way to Kansas. It wasn't in Kansas, but where did we go on the way to Kansas?
It's I have no freaking clue what it's called.
The Ozarks.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, we went to the Ozarks, and that was a mountainous region. I've been to.
I would go to the Grand Canyon there, for real there.
Yeah. Well, and for mine and Rachel's honeymoons, we went up to the Smoky Mountains. Went and saw Lookout Point and all that stuff.
Without me?
To a honeymoon? Yes, I went with you on my honeymoon. So we've been to quite a few mountains. It's really kind of breathtaking. So Nirali said she did in India. Obviously, in India, there's no shortage of mountains.
Wait.
So Mr. Raby has not. Man, I wish we could do a field trip to Ozarks. That's a long field trip. But to take him up in the mountains and let him see what that is like.
We just have to fly there. It wouldn't be that long.
Okay, so Patrick, you said you went to the mountains. What mountains did you go to? I'm curious which ones. Wish you took us to the tea plantation in Indonesia. Yeah, boy, that would have been fun. I'd love seeing that. Okay, so thousands of years ago, Hindus saw Mount Everest mountain as the center of the physical and the spiritual world. Oh, in Vietnam and in Japan. Oh, yeah, so I have been to the mountains in Japan. I've been there, too. Mount Everest is part of the Himalayan Mountains. Although, I'll tell you this, technically you're not going to the mountains in Japan. Those mountains aren't mountains, those are volcanoes. They're dormant volcanoes, but they're technically volcanoes.
You've been to Mount Fuji?
Yeah, Mount Fuji. Yeah, Fuji's not, it's called Mount Fuji, but it's not a mountain, it's a volcano. In fact, theoretically, it could explode and kill everybody. It's probably not going to, but it could.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, yeah. So.
Probably not going to kill the entire world.
Oh, in Tennessee? Yeah, that's where we went to. We went there as well, too. So I'm guessing you went to Lookout Mountain. That's where you went to.
Wait, have I been to Tennessee? Question mark.
Hmm?
Have I been to Tennessee? Question mark.
No, you had an opportunity, but didn't get to during the solar eclipse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Mount Everest is part of the Himalayan Mountains. So imagine driving down this road and seeing this in the background. I can't even imagine what that looks like. People began to climb it in let me explain the difference. Let's see. So a volcano is formed by something known as convergent subduction, right? So you can see a good picture of it right here. The tectonic plate hits another tectonic plate, and that plate, oh, this is a better one. That plate is shoved underneath the other plate. It builds up pressure, that starts to melt, and that forms a volcano, right? So that's how volcanoes form. You can kind of see one right here, okay? So a mountain is caused by something else known as a convergent collision. Okay, so this is what causes mountains. Two of them hit each other. So like think about it for your hands, right? If I got my hands and they smack one another, my hand can go underneath it, or they can smack each other and do this, right? And this causes mountains, this causes volcanoes.
That's how I learned it. Yeah. Like this causes volcanoes, this causes mountains.
No, I'm glad you asked. Hey, maybe somebody else didn't know. So, to navigate these mountains, people are, they have these special people that climb the mountains called Sherpas. And these are people from the Himalayas who climb the mountains there and help guide people in the Himalayas. Like if you want to go on a hike to Mount Everest, you're going to have the help of a Sherpa. And of course, they're the guys that bring the ladders and the ropes and all that stuff, right? And I wanted you to see this. They're making a really good documentary on Sherpas and the dangers involved.
We Sherpa people have a great respect for that mountain. She is the mother god of the earth.
Over here we climb mountains, but it's a holy place. Western people approach it as a physical challenge to see how close you can get to death. We have about 120 Sherpas or so that have died so far.
The risks that people were making the Sherpas take. What is the moral justification for that?
Roughing it on Mount Everest. Hot towels and tea in the morning.
My father said, I wish I had never climbed this mountain.
They are angry, yes, they are. For lack of respect.
Every time I send the Sherpas up in the mountain, it's like sending them off to war. I don't know who's going to come home.
So needless to say, it is very easy to die climbing Mount Everest. So my question is, would you ever want to climb Mount Everest? And if not, what is another great feat you want to accomplish in your lifetime? I think I know yours, but what's the great feat you would want to accomplish?
To go to Mars!
You have to go to Mars? Yeah, just to go to outer space. I think that would be the big one.
I have to go to Mars.
I don't think I want to be in a cage and swim with
You know
sharks.
what I want to do? Like, forever? Just swim with dolphins. I just want to swim with dolphins and sea otters. That's all I want to do in life. Dolphins.
Yeah, I think those are my two big ones, is to go into space. Obviously, I'd love to go to the moon.
There's a place where you can go that you can, like, actually swim with the sea otters.
Yeah, I don't think I care about swimming with sea otters. But is there some great feat you want to accomplish in your lifetime? Maybe skydive, or what are some other big ones that people can have on their bucket list? I do want to go to the Great Wall of China. That's another one. I don't know if I can jog the whole thing, but I would love to visit the Great Wall of China. Rachel wants to see a panda. Okay, so DeHavy says he wants to skydive. Skydiving for Kier also. What are some other ones? I pet a tiger before. You did too.
I pet a tiger!
Yeah, you pet a tiger.
I was about to say I wanted to pet a tiger. I pet a tiger!
Scuba diving. Yeah, scuba diving can be fun.
I've also pet a butterfly.
Okay, so most of the rivers in South Asia get their origins from the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas. The Indus, which we talked about, is like the kind of beginning of the civilization there, flows south through Pakistan into the Arabian Sea. And probably their most important river is the Ganges, which flows down from the central Himalayas.
I would do skydiving.
Yeah, I tell you, Narelle, it makes another good point too. That's another reason I want to climb Mount Everest. Man, I'm not down with a cold. They can't bundle me up enough to climb that thing. Let me tell you, Jay, you need to go to another country. And obviously not right now, but when the pandemic is over, you need to go to another country. I cannot begin to enough.
Off my bucket list.
Yeah, you've already been to the other side of the earth. So, it's so much fun.
Yeah, I crossed two things off my bucket list: going to see the other side of the world, and wait, I still have to go to Tokyo. Dang it!
I don't know if it was on her bucket list, but Rachel's been headbutted by a robot before.
Okay.
You remember in the Japanese airport where she tried to battle a robot and it headbutted her?
I remember that. But I've been to DC. That was another thing on my bucket list.
Yeah, that's on my list too. I'd like to go to DC.
It's amazing.
Now,
it's beautiful. You should see the cherry trees.
As Hinduism is the region of most Indians, during the religious festival, tens of millions gather at the city of Allahabad. They flood the markets and they pack out the temples, and then at the appointed time, they go wash away their sins in the Ganges River. Now, whenever I did this lesson, it was always in my geography class, and I always want to point out, I know that to some of us, when we hear this, having our Western sensibilities, it sounds really odd, right? Like, why is everybody going to bathe in this river? You know, it's a religious ceremony, right? So keep in mind, to a non-Westerner, some of our religious ceremonies seem extremely ridiculous also. Like, for example, why does everybody go outside and chop a tree down and drag it into their house to celebrate the birth of Jesus? Like, that sounds odd. Like, if you just pull it back and you listen to it, or you know, another one is like, oh, you're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus by dressing up as a giant rabbit and hiding chocolate eggs for kids. How does that make any sense, right? So I just want to preface that before anybody starts going, oh, that's weird. It's weird because that's not what you're used to, right? Keep that in mind when we talk about this. Okay. Now, the Ganges is an extremely important river for those living in India. It not only provides drinking water and irrigation and transportation, it is also this spiritual hub, right? It's believed that it brings life, and you can understand why people would view river as kind of like the source of life, right? In a lot of ways, it is a source of life. If you were to go to to the banks of the Ganges River, it's filled with temples. You know, that is like prime real estate for Hindu temples, right? Now, the river has had a nasty problem, and that is so much pollution, right? Because of all the pollution, you start having a lot of hepatitis, typhoid, cholera. Now, the government has tried to repair the pollution, but it is still a massive problem. So my question is, would you do something that is difficult or maybe put yourself in danger as a means of expressing your faith, right? Now, it varies in degrees, right? So like everybody that is of the Judeo-Christian faith, or a lot of people, will submerge themselves in water for baptism, right? Now, I wouldn't put that high on the totem pole of danger, right?
But you could drown.
You could, right? But, you know, you think about it, there's a lot of people right now that, in the name of their faith, they're going to church in the middle of a pandemic, killing themselves. You see a lot of people travel to Mecca in their lifetime to go visit the Dome of the Rock. So there's a lot of different cultures and customs. So my kind of question is, would you ever do something that is, and it doesn't have to be dangerous, it could just be something difficult. You know, I know for a lot of, say, Christians, you're supposed to give 10% of your money into the church. So is there something that you would do? Would you do something difficult or dangerous as a means of expressing your faith? Kind of curious what you think.
Not dangerous.
So since this, by the way, this is an update I've made. Since the pandemic, it has actually started to clean up the Ganges River. So this is a picture of the Ganges River right now. And of course you can see the water's much cleaner. There's not trash in it and stuff like that. And that has been a positive result. Oh, your dad wants to visit Israel? Yeah, I could see that. See the Wailing Wall. Now the rivers.
Isn't the Wailing Wall like the wall where they like put the notes into?
Yes.
Like the prayer notes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now the rivers in India create a rich source of irrigation and agricultural land. They carry rich soil known as the alluvial soil, and they deposit this soil along the alluvial plains, creating rich farmlands. The Indo-Gangetic Plain is the most heavily populated part of South Asia, right? It makes up 3% of South Asia's population. It includes most of the big cities. Okay, so right in here, this is the area we're talking about. And by the way, when we're talking about all the rich flavors of India, right, a lot of those rich flavors come out of here, right? This is kind of their bread basket, if you will, where all the food is, all that flavor, all the crops, and all that stuff. We're talking about this area right here, right? Okay, oops. So, how do you think the rich soil contributes to the variety of flavors in India? And the kind of question I ask is, have you ever had any Indian food? If so, what were your favorites? If not, would you try it? And you've had Indian food. Do you have any favorites? Rachel made butter chicken the other night. Yeah, you ate that butter chicken. You like that?
Wait, that was Indian food?
Yeah. There's curry. There's I know Joe loves hummus. I I know you don't like hummus. I think mine is that palakalu, that spinachy, cheesy
I don't like
dish.
spinach either.
Oh, so good. Yeah, but there's all kinds of different ones. So what do you think? Is there any particular foods? I'm really curious. What is your favorite in Raleigh? I'm curious what your number one go-to dish, Indian dish is. So let me know in the comments below. Yeah, Indian food's so good. I've never had Indian food, but I want to try curry. You know, when I was in ninth grade geography teacher, I used to bring in. I had a friend of mine that made palak aloo and palak paneer, and I'd make these 2 giant crock pots of Indian food and bring it in and let my students try it out. But let me tell you, there's a lot of great options. I would not. I would try Indian food coloring, because why not? Not Indian food coloring. Rice and curry. Yeah. No, if you want to donate some food in Raleigh, I'd love to have some homemade Indian food. And by the way, thank you for joining us, Noelle. So Jayla says she loves curry as well. And let me tell you this. I like spicy food, right? Penny Puri. Yeah, we had that. I remember Miss Nikki made that. That's that little thing that it's like you had to scoop the sauce into it and eat it. Oh, so good. There's another one, I can't think of what it's called, that Miss Divya made. That's almost like a.
I don't know.
You remember what I'm talking about? It's like the little bun with the food inside. And you break it open. It's got like the. It looks almost like a dumpling, like a flaky dumpling.
Oh, no.
I don't remember what it's called anymore. It's so good. Yeah, you and Joe killed those things.
I don't know.
And let me tell you, bay leaf. They're so active on social media. They were commenting on Joe's. My son got the purple belt in Taekwondo, and they commented on Penny Puri. Yeah, Bay Leaf, the Indian restaurant. Yeah, they're real active. They're real good people that run it too, but they're real active on social media. So if you're on social media, add Bay Leaf. They'll interact with you. We need to get Bay Leaf while they're doing takeout food. Now, Sri Lanka is a large tear-shaped island. It's a lush tropical island.
Is that an anchor?
I'm sorry?
Is that an anchor?
Where?
Like off of the island.
No, that's a resort.
Why is it in the shape of an anchor?
You'll see why in just a second. Now, it was decimated in 2004 by that same tsunami I told you about that messed up Indonesia. Same one. Of course, here's a picture of that giant tsunami, and you can see more footage of it. It would completely wrap around the island. You can see where it hit it on both sides.
Ah, crap.
Oh, yeah, we went there for Miss Ashley's graduation. You've been there before. It's the one. They also have a lunch buffet. Oh, so good.
Wait, I went to India? Wait.
No,
wait,
you went to Bay Leaf. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I'm like, I went to India?
So these are images of the tsunami that hit. Of course, the massive pile of dead that it piled up. Sri Lanka really got messed up by the tsunami just because, you can go back and look at it. There's nowhere to go, right? The whole island got whacked.
Please tell me those aren't people.
So the question I have is, so what are some problems of living on an island? What do you think are some problems of living on an island? I think the first and obvious one is in a tsunami. There ain't nowhere to go. And you're going to have things like that, like tsunamis and stuff like that. Are there any other problems you can think of that could
scarred for life,
that could exist from living on an island? Let me know what you think are some potential problems of living on an island. Now, the Maldives are an archipelago, and we learned in previous units or previous lessons, an archipelago is an island group. So Indonesia is an archipelago. The Maldives are an archipelago of over 1,200 islands. Isolation, that could be a problem. But only about 200 islands are inhabited, and the small ones are known as atolls. Okay, these are tiny little islands that just aren't big enough to support a civilization. So this is what you're talking about, those anchors, and this is why. Yeah, they're just trying to maximize that ocean front.
Because if a tsunami hits, they want to be drowned?
Well, let me tell you, these are dangerous, but man, if you know there's not going to be a tsunami, wouldn't you want to go stay there? I would.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. So yeah, some of y'all put resources, threats of floods,
You
tsunamis,
can see the coral reefs.
shortages of water. But let me ask you, who wouldn't want to go stay there? So my question is, now you have seen the bad side and the good side of being on an island. Do you think it's worth it to live on one? Like, on one hand, you got all those problems you talked about. Tsunamis, maybe issues with water, food shortages, resources. On the other side, I mean, look at that. You talk about living in paradise right there. Like, you don't have boring days.
say.
Let me tell you, that is quarantine nirvana right there. Like, if you could just go and live in one of these little huts,
And you'd be
I
isolated
could quarantine
too.
out there. You go out there and swim in the ocean every day. Oh,
Then, like, why don't we take a plane and fly over there?
well, you got to get on a plane to get there, and that's the problem. I don't. Let me tell you this. I don't want to be over there with Corona. I don't want that. Ravi would not. So, despite an abundance of resources, South Asia's massive population puts a strain on those resources. They rely heavily on their soil and water to provide food, fishing, farming, and transportation. And they began to use their dams for hydroelectric power. So, how do you think with their vast resources, it has both helped and harmed India? So, how does it help India? How does it harm India, having all these abundance of
They could
resources?
probably make a lot of money off of trade.
You
and
can make a
stuff
lot
like
of money, right?
that, but a lot of people will probably steal from them.
Right.
'Cause they won't-
Well, and here's the thing I think of. So, it's great that they have a lot of resources, but that's also part of the reason why they have a lot of people, right? You got a lot of people that are that live in India because it's able to sustain that many people, and so it kind of creates overcrowding. We're going to talk about this in a second. It also kind of creates an issue of everybody wants to conquer India to get some of those, those resources and flavors and stuff like that.
But then they wouldn't know how to keep the resources coming. So,
Yeah. So rainforests provide timber and prevent erosion. India is also the fourth in the world in coal production. They have enough petroleum oil to supply half of its oil needs, which is amazing with 1.2 billion people. They're also rich in uranium used for nuclear energy. Yeah, overpopulation is a problem. Now, like Southeast Asia, most of its region is affected by monsoons. These monsoons can cause a great deal of destruction for those living in the lowlands. They're also hit by cyclones, which are basically hurricanes spinning the other way. And a cyclone, spins the other way. It's good for self-sustaining country, but overpopulation is a problem. Yeah, you
Why
can make
does
a
it
lot of
matter
money, but
what-
overpopulation.
Why does it matter what way it spins?
That's what we call it. Now, my question is, have you ever been in a cyclone? If not, how about a hurricane? And if so, what was the worst hurricane or cyclone you have been in? I don't know that you've really been in one. Not really.
I think I have.
I don't think you have either. But I'm curious what y'all think in the comments below. Let me know. Now,
If anyone was born before 2005, then Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah. Now, the most forested areas are the tropical zones, and the subtropical zones have large forests as well. See the Jungle Book, right? We're talking about, like the jungle that you see in the Jungle Book is from that, right? Deforestation is becoming a major problem, and the deserts have very little plant life found there. So here's my next question. When is the AP test? It depends on which AP test you're taking, Noel. So whose class are you taking determines when your AP test. Not all of them are on the same day. So my question is, have you ever been in a jungle, or how about a large forest or swamp? Where were you and what was
We
it like?
live in a swamp right now.
We don't live in the swamp.
Let me see in a swamp.
Look, the bayou's right near us, but you hadn't been in it. Not really.
We have a forest. Right
Yeah, we do have a forest in our backyard.
I've been in the
You've
forest
also been to the
a lot.
Ozark National Forest. That's probably the biggest forest you've been in.
I go to Yellowstone.
Hmm?
I go to Yellowstone.
Yeah. So I'm curious, have y'all been in a jungle, a forest, swamp, anything like that? Let me know
All
in the
my friends hate
comments.
hiking. I'm like, if you just try it one time, you would want to go hiking every day of your life.
Well, no, I'd have to know what AP classes do you have? What AP class? That would have to be. Who's your AP teacher? If you're in an AP class, who's your AP teacher? That's really the $1 million question. All right. So, and Quinn says nope as well. By the 1970s, the Bengal tiger was nearing extinction, right? So the Bengal tiger is from India, right? It's named after the Bengal Bay that is in India. Hunters had killed them for their skins, and only about 1,800 of them remained. Many are captured for use in zoos or circus. So I think last I saw there are more tigers in zoos than there are running around in the wild. Today they are protected, and their populations have grown to around 4,000. You forgot who your teacher is? If you can't tell me the class or your teacher, I don't know how to help you, buddy. Sorry. So Jayla says she's visited some of the bayous. So my question is, have you ever seen? Oh no, well you'll know if you have an AP class. It'll say AP whatever, right? So like my AP class is AP U.S. History. There's AP Gov, AP Biology. You know, you'll know it if you have an AP class. Oh, National Animal of India. Oh yeah, the tiger's the national animal of India. So have you ever seen a tiger, and if so, when and where? Obviously, you've seen Mike the tiger. You've also seen that tiger that they brought to Albany.
Albie!
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've seen Albie. Yeah.
He's not a real tiger.
No.
He's a real tiger to me.
So India's culture and history date back more than 4,000 years. As people traded with or conquered India, it created a blend of many cultures. India would be part of many empires before winning its independence. So why do you think so many people wanted to either trade with or conquer India?
Because of their,
No cares all Mike the tiger. Yeah, Raleigh saw one on a school field trip. That's cool. Oh yeah, Vietnam's got tigers too. So why do you think everybody wants to conquer
resources? There we go.
Yeah, resources, right? Goes back to that other thing too. You know, me saying that the beauty of having resources is it allows you to have a self-sustained population. The con to it is it puts a big bullseye on your back. It says, hey, you know, if you're going to come try and conquer us, we got lots of goodies in store, right?
Now they can see us.
Yeah, and people love good food. India's got good food too. So Indian civilization begins in the Indus Valley, now Pakistan, around 2500 BC. 1,000 years later, the Aryans would cross into the Hindu Kush Mountains and conquer them, setting up small kingdoms on the Ganges Plain. They would begin to try to drive out anybody with dark skin. And this is where we get the first recorded case, and I'm sure it existed before that, but the first recorded case of white supremacists, right? So that is the Aryans, right? And they are the granddaddies of white supremacy, right? Their ideology has been taught throughout history as a means of justifying racism. So whether you're talking about Manifest Destiny, where we justified driving the Native Americans out of their land.
I've seen that.
KKK, Charlottesville, North Carolina, you know, where you got the white supremacists marching in the streets. And, of course, Adolf Hitler. And one of the things I said is, what was asked is, have you ever had a personal encounter with racism? And I'm not talking like on Facebook or something you watched on TV. I mean, you saw actual racism going down. Like you had a personal experience with it. I think you did and you didn't realize you did. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't attacking you, but I think you saw it, didn't realize you were seeing it. But it was that time that we were clothes shopping for y'all at Costco, and that dude called Rachel a racial slur used for Hispanics, even though she's not Hispanic. So yeah, I was not. Rachel calmed me down before I could escalate the situation, but I was not prepared to take that situation. Oh, and then I don't know if you remember that guy that stared us in IHOP that time. That was kind of frustrating.
And I started staring back at him.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, and I'm like,
yeah.
Excuse you? You got a problem with me?
So you know, unfortunately, it just is what it is.
Beat
It's
you?
really hard to get away from. You know, and I hate that some of y'all have had to deal with it. Kiera said she has. Quinn says she has. Nerali says she has. Yeah, I hate that y'all have to deal with that. I really, really do. Hopefully you never dealt with it in my class. One other thing of note, so let's go back to Hitler, right? So I'm sure you've seen this sign, and you're like, oh, that's the Nazi symbol, right? Most people know it as the Nazi symbol, and that's really honestly tragic. So the swastika...
Why is there a hashtag right there?
I don't know. The swastika is actually an ancient religious icon used in the Indian subcontinent. In fact, if you go to a lot of Hindu temples, you're going to see the swastika. But it does not mean pro-Nazism, right? It has been a sacred symbol of spiritual principles in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. It means being conductive to well-being, right? So, like, if you're using that symbol, it's basically saying it's like you're promoting well-being, right? It would be the equivalent of somebody saying, like, oh, stay safe, you know. Oh, yeah, so I'm sure Raleigh can talk about it too, right? So, and I'll tell you, this symbol has even kind of showed up in our culture, right? Like, we think of a four-leaf clover as being lucky, right? And you think about it, four-leaf clover is kind of like the swastika, right? There's this belief of like this symmetric design saying to promote good luck, right? Now, the Nazis would actually twist the swastika for their own evil purposes, right? And their rationale behind it is they were promoting well-being, but they believed well-being meant eliminating all the Jews. So that's why they adopted that symbol. And of course now, unfortunately, it's sad that that's the case. A lot of people will say, oh, that's the Nazi symbol. And I'll tell you, you know how I actually learned it? Was I went to a Hindu temple long ago, and there were Nazi symbols all over the walls, you know, to my dumb, uneducated brain. And I remember thinking, like, what kind of temple is this? It got Nazi symbols all over the wall. And then I had to have somebody explain. No, the swastika is... It was around for centuries before Adolf Hitler ever thought about it. But it's sad that that's kind of become the... Like, if I couldn't put that symbol in my classroom, even though it's just part of Indian culture.
I'm going to write it down in my notebook, and someone's going to be like, why the heck do you have a Nazi symbol in there? And we're like, it don't mean that! Ha!
Right. Now, later the Persian Empire would enter India, but did not conquer the Aryans. Instead, these two empires would merge and become the Mauryan Empire. The great Mauryan Emperor Asoka would also spread Buddhism throughout Asia. So he's a major guy for spreading Buddhism. Several centuries later, the Gupta Empire emerged under the centuries of peace and prosperity. And in the 5th century, Islam would conquer and take over India. And Muslims would begin to spread. The Mughal Empire would rule over India until Europeans arrived. So it creates this like interesting blend where, you know, Hinduism, if I'm like, where did Hinduism come from? Like, where is it big? And you're like, oh, India. But so is Buddhism, right? That's part of that Indian subcontinent. And then, of course, there's a large chunk of Islam. There's also Sikh and Jainism and a lot of other religions. Miss Nikki, her religion is from there, and I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, so they have a beautiful blend of different religions all kind of put together in one country. So my question is, how do you think that has both helped and hurt India? How do you think it's helped it? How do you think it's hurt it? Having all those different religions.
Over a lot of, like, there's a lot of, I don't know how to put it into words, dang it. A lot of people are going to be, like, hate other people, but a lot of people are going to think that it's cool that they're other.
Well, I think you're onto something. It's obvious, and we're going to talk about it in a second, it does create conflict, right? On the other hand, it also creates a better acceptance of diversity, right? Like, you've seen all our Indian friends, they're all really accepting of other religions. Like, they don't even think about it. Like, it's not a thing there, you know, at least for the friends we hang out with, right? Like, think about it in our group, you know, some of them are Islamic, some of them are Hindu. So, you know, there's like all these different religions where, you know, we attend a Christian church, and yet we all get along because we're just accepting of other people's faith, right? So in the 1500s, European traders came to India looking for spices, cloth, and other goods found in India. The French, Dutch, and Portuguese soon set up trading posts in India. The British would use this opportunity set up to monopolize trade in the region. Yeah, a good example heard is the and we're going to talk about it in a second, the Hinduism versus Islam conflict.
Why
yeah, people are going to
compete. Here?
I'm telling you. They would establish the now famous East Indian Company. However, this is also going to give rise to pirates. So, like, when you watch Pirates of the Caribbean, That is during the age of the East Indian Trade Company. In fact, in the beginning of it, they captured Jack Sparrow, and if you remember that scene in the movie, they roll up his sleeve, and you see this. He says, "Oh, I see you had a brush with the East Indian Trade Company," because they would mark you if you were a pirate. So just in case you escaped, everybody knew you were a pirate. Of course, there's the P, pirate. So that gives rise to pirates. And my kind of question is, do you have a favorite pirate movie, book, or game?
Jack Sparrow.
You like Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yes.
Yeah? That's your favorite?
Yes.
I used to love a cartoon named Pirates of the Dark Water. And of course there's always Captain Hook. He was a pirate. Now in 1757, Britain had become the most powerful nation on the world, and at the time, the most powerful nation the world ever seen. The East Indian Trading Company also became one of the most powerful economic forces on the planet. They had monopolized trade in India and began to spread their business throughout the globe.
I love how North and South America are just like completely cut out.
Well, they were in that time. Oh, the Pirate King gang. Now, as India grew to resent the power of the company had over their country, they tried to revolt, and Britain would put down that revolt and assume direct control over India. And this period of control was known as the Raj, and it would last for nearly 90 years. And this is kind of like, even though they made up the majority of the country, it's like Jim Crow for Indians in their own country, right? So what problems do you think would arise from colonization? I already kind of mentioned one of them, but you know, if we were to be colonized, let's say North Korea conquered us and colonized us, what are some problems you think that might arise?
Wait.
If we were conquered by another country, what are some things you think that would happen that you would not like?
They might try and take away our religion, or
So religious persecution. What else?
they might tax us.
No else jumping ahead of us. Yeah, overtaxing of us. Absolutely. All that stuff. So, despite the benefits of British rule offered, most Indians resented colonization, mostly because of the oppression, particularly of religion, right? So, a great leader by the name of Mahatma Gandhi began an opposition movement based on nonviolent resistance. His movement was so successful that Britain finally gave in, and India gained its freedom on August 14, 1947. This model would become the blueprint for the civil rights movement. And here's a quote from Martin Luther King, and he said, "Gandhi was inevitable. If humanity is to progress, Gandhi is inescapable. He lived though and acted inspired by the vision of humanity evolving towards a world of peace and harmony. We may ignore Gandhi at our own risk." So my question is, do you agree with nonviolent protest? Or do you think it even works? When we know it worked with the civil rights movement, we know it worked in India, what do you think?
Yes.
You know, we've also seen examples where it didn't work, right? Like we tried nonviolent protest with
Britain.
Yeah, with Britain, and it didn't work. We had to resort to violence. We've seen nonviolent protests try to bring down slavery. That didn't work.
I agree with it though.
So, yeah, you're pro nonviolent. I think I am too.
Violence is never the answer.
Yeah.
But if you have to kick some butt, then do it.
Well, I think with nonviolent protests, it's like a slower way to get there, but it actually gets you there, right? Because you think about it this way, like in the Civil War, there's a lot of people here that still feel like slavery should have never ended. And it's, what, hundreds of years later? You know, so I think it's a more complete victory when you win the war of morality.
I swear, if I see someone else a slave, I'm gonna like straight up punch him
Right.
in the face and just like.
Now, with
No.
India's newfound freedom, the Muslims of the West sought to form their own nation. They broke off the Indian mainland and formed new countries by the names of East and West Pakistan. Right, so it was this really weird situation where you got this country over here and this country over here, separated by thousands of miles, but they're one country. Now, as you can imagine, this division created violence between the Hindus and the Muslims that were not already within these new borders. So if, let's say you were in Bangladesh, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, we're a new country now. and you're Hindu, you're like, wait a minute, I've lived here all my life. What do you mean you're now an Islamic country? And then vice versa, right? If you were Muslim living in India, you would face it the other way, right? So it became a focus of forced migration that caused a great deal of hardship for the people living there. How do you think the U.S. would respond if we split into more than one nation? And I'll tell you this right now. If, let's say they decided, all right, the South splits up, the North's going to be a country, and the South is going to be a country, right? Like, we're going to have another civil war, and the country's going to split in half. Man, I'm hightailing it out of the South. I'm moving tomorrow to get out of Louisiana. Just because I don't want to be here when it's, ultra-conservative, I wouldn't want, because we know that the southern states live off off of aid from the northern states, right? So it could get really nasty real fast. So India's first prime minister was a guy named Jawaharlal Nehru. I know Nehru. He was an associate of Gandhi. Sorry if I butchered that enunciation. Under Nehru, India adopted a new constitution and became a democratic republic in 1950. Today, with a population over a billion people, it is the world's largest democracy. And I love this quote. Facts are facts and will not disappear on account of one's likes. What a great quote. So why is it important that India remain a democracy? That it not be a dictatorship or something like that? Well, we already kind of talked about it. What was something that makes India unique? Why it's so important that it be a democracy?
The resources?
That's part of it, but think about it from a human standpoint. Like, we talked about what different groups of people exist in India.
Different religious groups?
Yeah, right. So think about it this way. If it became a dictatorship, how bad could that get for different religions, right? Having a dictator telling everybody what to do. So it's very important that it remain a democracy so that you maintain that peace. Now, like the U.S., India is a federation of states held together by a central government. Like Britain, they have a parliamentary system where the leader of the majority party becomes the prime minister and the head of government. The relationship between Hindus and Muslims remains a key role in politics. Now, this would come to a boiling point in 1948 when Islamic extremists were angered by Hindu-friendly Indian policies and decided to assassinate Gandhi. This relationship would be tested again further with other high-profile assassinations of people in government positions. However, despite these terrorist attacks, India has managed to remain peaceful. And why is it that such a powerful nation as India is able to overcome the forces that divide it? So why do you think they're able to overcome it? I think this is one of those areas, for me personally, where, there's always that debate of, is religion a good thing or a bad thing? And I think this is one of those examples of where it's a good thing. Obviously, it's bad in that you could make the standpoint of, like, they're killing each other over religion, right? So that's the nasty side. But me personally, I think the good side of it is, I think that the Indian people rely on their religion to allow them to overcome hardship, right? You think about Gandhi and what he accomplished. That's kind of ingrained in that Indian culture, that Indian philosophy, the Indian religions that come out of there, is to have that tolerance, that acceptance. I'm sorry you had to go, Jayla, but thank you for joining us today. And always glad you could make a part. Oh, and by the way, make sure also, too, anybody that's in here, Noel, I know you haven't done this on almost any of them. Submit any of these that you show up, submit them. Make sure you hit submit in Google Classroom. Same thing, I don't remember, I think Jayla, I think you haven't submitted some of yours too. So make sure you submit. Oh, and Kiera too, make sure you submit any of these that you've done, make sure y'all submit them in Google Classroom. Now, India has a massive population that has put a strain on their economy, as I said earlier. Before the 1960s, most of the nation lived in poverty, and today still half...
Is that a goat?
Yeah. Nearly half of the country lives in poverty. They have a massive problem of disparity of wealth. So there's some people that are really rich in India, and there's a lot of people that are really not rich in India. A major change in India would occur in the 1960s. A series of famines led a scientist to uncover new farming techniques. Yeah, in front of an enemy, all of India pulls together. I love that. It's a great way to put it. Okay, I'll have to go back and check here because I tried to grade them the other night, and it seemed like there were some I remembered you doing that I didn't see you had submitted, but I'll go look again. Anyway, so they focused on higher yield grains to improve production, right? This is basically like natural selection. However, many poor farmers lacked the money to take advantage of these technological improvements. So for the people it helped out, for the farming community, it created more haves and have-nots. So think back to when you were the most hungry and how did that impact you? Maybe the time you were the most hungry. I think about that, you getting sick on your field trip because you didn't eat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, how does
the
it
thing is,
impact
I
you when you're
wasn't
really, really
there.
hungry? How does it impact you when you're
Like,
really hungry?
I wasn't hungry.
For me, it's like, man, it's hard to function, right? Like if I'm sitting in class, I'm starving. It's like it's hard for me to think about anything but eating.
Like if I'm really hungry though, like my stomach will start like I usually get like really hungry like whenever my blood sugar drops, and it drops because I'm so hungry.
Yeah, I remember
like,
having to carry you the other day.
But like
We went out on a nature
I
hike,
don't feel hungry.
and Elizabeth skipped breakfast. Yeah,
I
that was fun.
forgot to eat.
And I had to carry her home. That was fun.
I forgot to eat. I'm sorry.
About a 6-mile nature hike, and I had to carry her for the last mile and a half of it. That was fun. Now, although agriculture is the main economic activity of India, industry is also a major important element. Cotton textiles have been a major product of India. If you've ever seen Indian clothing, oh man, it is elaborate, beautiful. I mean, you know, they got some of the best. And we're gonna. I don't want to spoil the surprise. We're gonna go to Indian fashion here in just a second. Yeah, I can't concentrate either. Beginning in the late 40s, other industries began to develop, and India is now a major producer of iron and steel. Cities such as Bangalore have become high-tech hubs. Rachel gets cranky. Hundreds of software companies are now taking advantage of India's low wages and highly skilled workers. Cities such as Bangalore represent the future of modern Indian economy. If y'all have an iPhone, almost all the technology that goes in your iPhone. Now, the iPhone is an American company, but the components, the technology, that all comes out of India. In fact, if you go to LSU, which is where we made friends with all these Indians, right? If you go to LSU and you go to their engineering department, you would think you were in Bangalore. I mean, it's just filled with Indians. Oh yeah, show your bag from Miss Nikki. Go get your bag from Miss Nikki. Oh.
There it is.
Now,
I don't know where you put it.
how has education impacted your family, and what are your plans for education? So how has education impacted your family, Elizabeth?
Education. But you're a teacher.
Okay, how's that? How did me getting education impacted you?
When I don't want to do my work because it doesn't count for anything anymore, you're like,
Oh, it counts.
No, it doesn't.
It counts.
They legit say like it doesn't count.
Well, it doesn't count for points. It counts though.
No, it doesn't.
It counts for knowledge.
It doesn't make my grade any higher or any lower.
But not everything in your life is about making your grade high. Rachel says show her bag. Do you know where Rachel's bag is?
No.
Oh, go. Well, we'll get to it in a second. Now, although the nation is modernized, it retains many traditional ways and is a blend of old and new.
Just to text you.
Yeah.
Just gonna text.
Quinn says so she can have money and get a good job. It's a blend of old and traditional cultures, right? Families in India are often large and often have multiple families living together in the same home. This is probably one of those areas where you think it's really bizarre, but I want you to hang with me. Many marriages in India are often arranged, right? It's very rare that someone marry outside of their social class, and they have something in India known as the caste system. Most marriages are often male-dominated. However, here's part of the pro to it, right? Divorce is very rare in India. Some affluent people have begun the movement to allow people to select their own partners to marry. one of the things that's fascinating is I hung out with a lot of Indian people, is a lot of times people would ask me and Rachel, they'd say, oh, is yours a love marriage? And it's not, they're not saying it to be offensive, right? Like, they don't consider it offensive, and I don't get offended by it because I know their intent. But it's because, it's not unheard of for somebody that they know to be in an arranged marriage, right? So that's actually kind of a fairly common, not super common, but it's a common occurrence for them to have known somebody that's in an arranged marriage, right? Now, the question I have to ask you, and of course, it kind of goes back to that same thing of, one of the things about it, and I wish I was in class to better describe this, is there's a lot of things that I wish I had thought of when I first got married the first time that I now knew as an adult, being older, to make a better decision, right? The things that I thought were important in my early 20s are different than the things that I thought were important in my mid-30s. So you can kind of understand the benefit of having an older, wiser, and adult help you make the decision of who to marry. If for no other reason, then let me tell you this right now. The person you are at 20 is going to be so different than the person you are at 30. It's going to blow your mind, like how different you are. So it is more likely that your parents would find somebody that you are better suited with than you selected for yourself. And I know that sounds crazy. And even as I say that, I don't want anybody telling me who I got to marry. But here's the question is, I'm jumping the gun, but if you knew that the person you married, you were going to end up happy with, all right? You're going to live a long, happy life with them, all that stuff. And by the way, here's Elizabeth's Indian purse.
Yes, Mom's.
Oh, that's Rachel's. But if you knew that you were going to live a long, happy life, and your parents were going to find a really good spouse for you, right? You knew that, right? You had a crystal ball, and it told you. If you knew that they were going to pick out a good person for you to marry, and you were going to live a long, happy life with that person, would you let them pick out your spouse? No. Even if you knew, like if some magical way I could guarantee that the person I'm picking out for you, you're going to grow up to a ripe old age, you're going to live a long, happy life, and have great grandkids and all that stuff. Would you let me pick out your spouse?
Mm-mm.
Why? You should just let me do it anyway.
I want to pick the person that
Daddy knows best. No, let me pick it.
The last person who said that was Mother Gotham when she literally stole the child.
Yeah.
For her hair.
Now, Indians eat a largely vegetarian diet. Of course, this kind of goes into the religion of not wanting to harm living creatures, right? They eat a lot of rice, flatbreads. Some Indians eat fish and chicken in spicy curry dishes called curry. Most limit beef from their diet due to religious practices. So what are some, and I won't lie, this is for selfish purposes, but what are some of your favorite vegetarian dishes? These are dishes with no meat in it. I think yours is probably mac and cheese. Well, what are some of your favorite vegetarian dishes? Let me know in the comment section below.
So that you can make more vegetarian.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm glad Rachel's not in a situation where her parents picked out her spouse. So most Indians still work on farms or in small craft industries. As the economy changes, many are beginning to work in technology, information, and factories and offices. In fact, a lot of tech support comes out of India. Tempeh. Yeah, I'd never had tempeh till Rachel. Education has been key for change. Literacy has gone up dramatically since the 1950s. A major part of this expansion in the Indian economy has been a dedication to education, especially math and science. And this goes back to that thing I was saying before. When you hear about, Asians being better at math and science, particularly math, it's just the culture, right? It is the culture of the dedication to particularly math and science, but to education in general. So it is a cultural thing, not an innate IQ thing. Oh, mung bean dumplings. Oh, that sounds good. That sounds really good. So my question is, what is your dream profession? I know you want to be an astronaut. I'm living my dream, to be honest. The only job I would rather have than teacher is I would love to have a major political office, like a governor or president or something like that. That's the only job I could have that I would want more. It's just basically the means to create positive change.
I'm gonna be an astronaut.
I wouldn't mind being an astronaut though. If they asked me to be a first teacher in space, I'd do it. But I'm curious, what are your dream jobs? You know, if you could have some job, what would be your dream job come true? Mr. Raby wants to be a musician. Maybe you can make my theme song then. Shoot, we're gonna have the end of the first season, and I won't have a DeHavius theme song. All right, so to talk about Indian and Indian subculture, you got to talk about Hinduism, right? And I'm probably going to do another one later on that really goes into detail. Let's see, zoologist, physician's assistant, or criminologist. Okay, fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about Hinduism. It is the third largest religion on earth and makes up about 15% of the Earth's population. Oh, something with travel? Boy, that'd be fun, to be like a travel guide or something like that. It makes up about 79% of the people of India are Hindu. Now, Hindus believe in many gods, and they believe in reincarnation and karma. This is one of my ultimate pet peeves, and I see this all the time, right? Game developer, game programmer. Hey, we got a long weekend. You got a 3-day weekend to have you, so I'm just saying. Anyways.
Wait, we do?
Well, they do, because I can't do my lesson tomorrow. I got to do AP testing. Yeah. So, no, I won't have a lesson tomorrow. I got to do AP.
Oof.
So, you often hear people say something bad will happen to somebody, and they'll say, well, that's karma, right? Or you'll hear people say, what goes around comes around. It does not mean that, right? Even the people that came up with it, Hindus, do not believe that if you were bad to somebody, you're going to get punished next Tuesday. That's not how it works. The way it works is they believe that if you do something good, you build up karma. And then when you get reincarnated in your next life will be the benefit of that karma. Not this life. Okay? And almost every single person should instantly realize that karma, as Americans understand it, which is wrong, by the way, doesn't work, right? How many people do you know that are just terrible people, and because they're horrible, they get to be the boss at work or whatever it is? And I'm not saying Bradford, I'm just saying everybody has, at some point in time, been around somebody that took advantage of somebody else, and they never had to suffer the consequences. Conversely, if you ever go to a hospital, you'll see little kids that did nothing wrong and that you have childhood leukemia. And it's like, what'd he do to deserve that? Right? So I want you to understand that. Like, when you say, like, if something bad happens to somebody, you go, oh, that's karma. No, it's not. That's not karma. You're misusing the term. Karma believes it, let's say I were to kill somebody, right? Then in my next life, I'm going to be reborn and suffer the consequences for my actions in this life. Conversely, if you do a lot of good, let's say I save a busload of nuns and I cure polio or whatever, right? Whatever it is I do. In my next life, I'm going to benefit from that, right? When I'm reincarnated. So a lot of people misuse the term karma. It does not mean, oh, Susie cheated on her husband, so she's gonna get fired at work. It doesn't work that way. It's not. Yeah. Anyway. So my question for you is, how important is it to you that you do the right thing, and what drives you to do it? What drives you to do the right thing? Is it religion, society, yourself?
My conscience.
Your dad?
My conscience.
Your dad?
My conscience. Yes, you. Yes, you.
Yeah, and there's a multitude of factors. Like, I feel like even before I had the religion I had now, I still had an innate desire to want to do the right thing. I would definitely say that my religion is a driving factor today. Yeah, I know. I got up too early to work on this. Now, the social class system in India is known as the caste system, and it is so Quinn says herself and her parents.
Oof, we've seen this.
So does Kira said for her parents and herself. It connects with Hinduism, right? So if you do good deeds, you go up the caste system, right? So let's say you're a priest, right? You're a really good purpose. You're a really good person. You're of the Brahmin class, right? But you secretly are a serial killer, right? You kill women in their sleep, right? Just some horrible action, right? Then when you die and you're reborn, you might come down here and be an untouchable. Okay, so Riley says her parents, herself, and somewhere religion too. So that's how it's seen, right? So, but I mean, conversely, let's say you're born an untouchable, but throughout the course of your life, you always help people. You know, you do great things. You cure cancer, whatever. You may be reborn your next life
as a god.
You know,
cure
yeah,
cancer.
I mean theoretically.
If you cure cancer, you're gonna be born above the gods, like for real.
Okay, Davey says it's really important for him to do the right thing. My family, myself, drive me to do good. Awesome. Now, how important is it for you that someone you date be of a similar economic or social class as yourself?
Not at all.
Really?
No, I don't care.
So, would you date some rich snob?
Not if they're a snob. Like, if they're rich.
But
I
let
wouldn't
me ask you:
care.
does money have any impact on you?
No.
No. What about social class?
No.
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 You wouldn't be slightly intimidated to say date a celebrity?
No.
Yeah, I don't know that I could date a celebrity. I don't know.
What, out of fear of them, like, dumping you for someone else?
No, I don't know that I'd want that
If they
kind
love
of
me, then they love me. If they don't, then
like I couldn't date a Kardashian, right? I wouldn't want that kind of negative influence in my life. To me, it wouldn't justify the money involved. And I'll tell you, even outside of culture and religion, it's very rare somebody
if
dates.
they're a bad person, then they're a bad person.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge
It's
them on
very
how much
rare
money
somebody dates outside of their social class. I'm not saying it never happens.
They could be the richest person in the world. They could also be the rudest and ugliest person, or they could be like the nicest
even as I
person.
say this, I can't think of anybody that comes to mind that is dating far outside of their social or economic class. I don't know anybody. If you can think of somebody. Like my parents are basically in the same socioeconomic class. Yeah, I can't think of any.
I don't really care how much money someone has. Like, money doesn't have an impact.
To me, I think it's
If
more the
like
value
you, then I
system.
Like you. If I don't, then I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not
Serenali says no. Looks like Quinn says no. Kiera says no. All right. Well, let me ask you: could y'all date a celebrity? Would that bother you if you had to date a celebrity? I'm kind of curious what y'all think.
Yeah.
So Pakistan has anywhere from 100 to 120 nuclear warheads, and that is still growing, and they're still testing them as of 1998. However, they lack their ability to use them due to a rocket program. Here's where the problem comes, is that Pakistan has a very unstable government. It's more like because they don't run in the same circle. Well, I'll tell you, we never ran in the same circle. Yeah, and that's true. That's probably why it happens a lot. But anyway, this creates fears about what will happen if these weapons of mass destruction ever find themselves in the hands of a terrorist. So my question is, what level of fear do you have that a terrorist could get a hold of a nuke? Like, how scared are you of that? How much are you worried that could ever happen?
I don't really worry about that stuff.
Yeah?
Like, yeah, if it were to happen, then I'd be definitely afraid of it.
Right.
But I'm more scared that I'm gonna get stung by this new friggin' hornet thing.
Oh, the killer hornets?
Yeah, the new killer hornet thing. I was,
Oh, murder hornets, that's what they're called.
yeah, earlier I was on my phone, and there's this ad that popped up for, like, the news. There was this, like, friggin' leaf thing, and it was some type of caterpillar, and it moved, and it was the size of a leaf, and it looks like a lobster dressed up as a spider for Halloween. Like, for real.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it
So-
was the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Like India, Pakistan, and
For real,
Bangladesh.
though.
Oh, yeah, me
I'm
too.
more scared of that than, like, a terrorist. Like,
So like India,
Yeah.
Pakistan, and Bangladesh are both young countries with
Pretty.
ancient histories and a rapid growing population. The largest of the world's first civilization grew up in the Indus Valley around 2500 BC. This too would be conquered many times by the British. Now, the end of the British rule in 47 brought the partition of India, which we already talked about. to East and West Pakistan. Now, this led to a great deal of violence, which we kind of already talked about. Now, today, both Pakistan and Bangladesh have political struggles since independence.
That thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing I was talking about.
Yeah.
That thing. It's friggin'
Short.
Ew. Ugh. Can't do it. I can't do it. I can't.
Yeah. Short periods of elected governments have alternated with long periods of military rule. So my question is, how different do you think life would be like if the U.S. decided to declare martial law to end the pandemic and then never gave it up? Is that something you would fear? And I'll tell you,
Yes.
I'm kind of the impression I wish they had declared martial law just to end this coronavirus. But even I could admit that that was a scary proposition, because what if they don't give that up? You know? It would be an easy way for the U.S. to slide into being a police state. So I go back and forth of whether or not I want martial law or not. But I'm curious what y'all think. Now, political corruption had plagued both Pakistan and Bangladesh. They fought several destructive wars with India over territory, particularly in the Kashmir region. Most people who live in these two nations are subsistence farmers, and have been new development is the increase called a microcredit. Microcredit is use of very small loans to help small up-and-coming entrepreneurs start their own business. So my question is, have you ever borrowed or loaned money and had a bad experience? Had a bad experience with it? And I've probably been on both. I probably borrowed money and loaned money, and both cases it did not go good.
I don't have any money to borrow or loan, so like.
I kind of go off the thing of like, if I'm going to loan somebody money, I'm going to do so assuming I'll never see it again. So, and I've had good experiences too, but I've had some bad ones. So, curious what y'all have to say in the comment section. Okay, Nepal and Bhutan. They're both located in the Himalayas, and this created geographic isolation. Mount Everest is actually located in Nepal. Throughout their history, both have been religious theocracies. Hindu people were ruled by Nepal, and Buddhists controlled by Bhutan. Today, both are constitutional monarchies with a limited constitution. Both nations have very limited resources, and economic growth have been slow. They have had soil erosion become a major problem, right? So we're dealing with that too, right? So here's Louisiana. You can see Louisiana is falling victim to erosion. So my kind of question is, what is your fear level of Louisiana eroding, knowing that the whole state is below sea level? Yeah. Yeah, most of the state's below sea level. Mm-hmm. Alright, so leave your comments in the comment section below. So Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Both Sri Lanka and the Maldives have strong ties to India. In the 6th century BC, people from India crossed the narrow strait into the subcontinent of Sri Lanka. They became known as the Sinhalese, and in the 4th century, another migration would occur, and this was called the Tamils, or Tamils. This group brought a new language and Buddhism. Europe began to take turns controlling the island, and they would win their independence in 1948. With their new freedom, violence began to break out between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, leading to a civil war where it erupted into violence. So my question is, do you think religion has played a calming or created a violence in the region and here in the U.S.? So you think basically religion has been more of a calming influence or more of a violence creating influence?
Probably in the U.S.
Uh-huh. Mostly I'll have a lot of fear of Louisiana eroding. But what do you think? You think it's been more of a calming thing, or a violence-inducing thing?
I don't really see. I don't know.
I mean, obviously the answer is both to some degree.
I don't know if I would say like exactly calming, like.
Alright, so although the Maldives
I'm
were
not sure.
settled by, we're getting real close to the culture part. Were settled by Buddhists and Hindus from Sri Lanka and India in the 12th century. Most had converted to Islam. 6 dynasties of Muslim rulers or sultans governed the Maldives and declared it as a republic. Although it is 1,200 islands, only about 3,000 people live in the Maldives, making it one of the world's smallest independent nations. And the last question before I'm going to swap over to the culture one is going to be, If you could live on a tropical island, but it meant giving up technology, would you? Would you give up technology to live on a tropical island?
That's tough. But I don't think I could live without my phone.
Yeah?
But I would get a really nice tan.
You would have a nice thing.
Oof. I don't know.
Okay, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to end this live stream, and I'm going to start another live stream, right? So give me a full minute, maybe. I'm going to instantly end it, but let's give everybody about another minute to hop back in it. So go back to my channel, and I'm going to start a new live stream because I feel this part of the video is going to get cut out, and I don't want this. I want this chunk to stay intact. I don't want the other chunk to go away. So I'm going to end this and start another show. So go back to my live chat. You're going to see it in just a second, right? So see you in just a minute.